We are in lesson 9. Our study on the portraits of discipleship. As we've been walking through each of these different descriptions, we are now on talking about the importance of being a servant. The importance of recognizing that being a servant of Jesus and being a servant of God, obviously there's nothing directly that I could do for God or Jesus in the sense of something personal directly related to them. And so how is it generally that we show our love and service to them? By doing what?
Helping others.
Helping other people. If we demonstrate our love and our service towards God and our devotion to Him, it's implemented, if you will, or shown or evidenced by the things that we do for other people. And that's been the study that we've been in. I want you to pick up in lesson 9, page 55, where he begins talking about the idea that we've got to be aware. If we're going to help other people, we've got to be aware of other people and their needs and ways that we may be able to be of assistance to them. And so it's important for us to spend some time, then in other words, getting to know folks. We talked last Wednesday night at the close of our study that one of the other dispositions that we need to work towards is we've got to have the right attitude towards service. But it doesn't do you have the best attitude in the world. You can be as meek and as humble and as have all the right mindsets all day long. But if I don't spend some time with my eyes open, paying attention to the needs of others, if I'm not aware of things that I might be able to do in service to others, then obviously I won't be able to fulfill those needs. And that's really, we could spend our whole Bible class this morning in some ways talking about that fact. Because there's lots of things that have to happen in order for that to occur. Number one, I got to be interested in the well-being of others. If I'm not interested in their well-being, then I won't be very aware of what their needs might be. I won't be paying attention to the things that they might need. I also have to kind of leave self behind. And to be aware of what others need sometimes requires me to forget about what I need in the moment. Forget about myself long enough to be able to be aware of others. And it also requires me to get to know people. That may be the hardest part of all, because we tend to be very satisfied with small nucleuses of people that really know us. We become very satisfied with just a small inner circle. Maybe they're family, maybe they're people that I've known for a long, long time, but we've kind of cocooned ourselves in some ways with just a handful of people. And because of that, what that challenges is it may be perfectly fine for me, but it hinders other people from knowing how they can be of benefit to me and how they can interconnect. Churches do it. Let's not hide that reality. Local congregations, especially the bigger they are. The bigger they are, the more danger there is for there to be pockets. It's not that people don't like each other. It's not that people aren't interested in the well-being of others. It doesn't have anything to do with that. It has to do simply with the idea that we get comfortable with a handful of folks and we just kind of become satisfied with that. But when we do that, we're not very aware of what the real needs and how we can help other people might be. I was talking to some folks yesterday about the fact there was an occasion up in Moundsville where I had made a comment to the congregation about how, especially, if you've ever been in that building up there, it's enormous. And it was real easy for folks to just kind of sit in little pockets all over the building, and they never left their pews. They went to the same spot in that building every time. Oh, looky around here. It seems that happens other places too, right? And I made the comment that you might just be surprised that what it would bring of benefit to you if you moved once in a while, and you might actually have to have a conversation with somebody that you hadn't seen in 2 months, even though you've been in the same building month after month after month after month, but you actually happen to sit closer to them and actually engage them in conversation. One of the ladies in the congregation took it upon herself to email everybody before the next Sunday and told them all to switch seats, and I was as confused as I could be when I got in the pulpit because nobody was in their right spots. We have become so accustomed to of where people were. That it even looked odd to me looking at it from the pulpit because the building almost looked entirely different when people would move. But you know what's interesting is they all agreed afterwards, though it did force them, in a sense, to engage in conversation and talk to some folks that they hadn't talked to. The sad part was, you know what they did the next Sunday? They went right back. They went right back. Now, as an illustration, I'm just trying to help you recognize. You don't necessarily need to move pews. You just may need to move in a direction towards somebody at some point to be able to engage them. We've got to be aware of one another's challenges, what their strengths are. That's what being a part of a family, especially a spiritual family, is all about. And there are things that you can benefit from me. I can benefit from things from you. That's the whole point of referencing this idea of our talents. Run to Romans chapter 12. And once you think about it, in light of this conversation that we're having. Romans chapter 12 and verse 6. He said, and having gifts differing according to the grace that was given to us, whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of our faith. Ministry, let us give ourselves to our ministry, or he that teacheth to his teaching, or he that exhorteth to his exhorting. He that giveth, let him do it with liberality. He that ruleth with diligence. He that showeth mercy with cheerfulness. And we've talked about this concept in other lessons, but I want you to think about it in light of this lesson. There are things that you can do that I can't. There are talents and gifts that you have that I don't have. And we've talked about it in a sense of how that strengthens the unity of a congregation. And it provides for all things necessary for a congregation to grow and do its work because we have various talents. But let me also suggest to you in a very personal way that our various gifts and talents in life may very well benefit one another. Ed Long said something to me years and years ago, and it struck me. It struck me. He said, Brian, he said, I don't understand. I just want you to think about it, and I think he was right. He was honest. He said, I don't understand why my brethren will drive right past my hardware store and go purchase the very basically same product from another place without ever thinking about the fact that here's their brother in Christ over here who's got a perfectly good hardware store, and the items in that hardware store are practically identical to what they just drove right past him to go and purchase. And he wasn't complaining, by the way. We were in a conversation related to that kind of thing. But he was right. I remember one of the great lessons my dad taught me when I was young. I can remember Lisa, I'm trying to remember which project it was, Mom, but when in one of the additions on the backside of the house, but there were a couple guys at the time who were laid off, members of the church, who were laid off or not laid off, on strike, I think they were, up at PPG at the time. And Dad hired them to come down there and build that addition onto the house. And one of them, well, I can remember very vividly when he came to the services for Dad, which seems like eternity ago now, but he said, Brian, I have never forgotten that your dad and his willingness to use me to help build that project kept my family fed while we were on strike at PPG. I'm just trying to illustrate to you. You don't know what simple things like, you may not even think about it. You think, well, I need an addition built on, let me call a contractor and let's get it done, right? But you may be surprised how somebody's got a talent that can be used for your benefit. Number one, we got a nice addition to the house at the end of that project, right? And a member of the Lord's body was able to help feed his family for a period of time that was difficult in their lives. Use our talents to benefit one another. Be servants of one another from a humility standpoint, from an attitude standpoint, from all that kind of thing. But also be aware of one another. Where people are in their lives. And that, again, takes time. It takes a willingness. I mean, there's still people that I know that really have never left the acquaintance level. And I don't say that, I just say that's just a reality. They don't want me in, right? They don't want me in their life. They don't want me to know anything about them. So I get that. I know there are going to be folks like that. You're going to run into folks who just build a wall, and it doesn't matter what you do, that wall's not coming down. But there are some people who haven't built walls. We just haven't done enough to try to have the kinds of conversations that are necessary, and one guy can't do it. Or a couple of men in the congregation who happen to serve as leaders can't do all of that. It's an impossibility. It's difficult enough in some ways just to know how to fill out a bulletin sometimes. And who needs prayers, and who doesn't, and what's good. But imagine if one person had to not just keep a list, but if one person is the only one concerned and actually having conversations and trying to figure out what people's needs might be. It's too hard. And again, the larger the number, the harder it is. So we all need to be engaged in it. We all need to be actively trying to become as aware as we can of what the needs might be. Because once we're aware, then we know how to help. Once we become engaged in that fashion, then we know how to better serve one another. Any thoughts up to that? I'll slow down for a second. Go to Philippians chapter 2. Philippians chapter 2. Verse 3. It's a familiar passage in the context of our study. He says, "Do nothing through faction or through vain glory, but in lowliness of mind, each counting others better than himself." Can I ask you a quick question? I'm putting you on the spot maybe a little bit, but I want to hear what you have to think about. He says, "Do nothing through faction." Somebody tell me what in the world he's talking about. Do nothing through faction. We read this verse all the time, but I think we jump straight to the end of the verse or into the context of verse 4, and we never really talk. What does he mean by that?
This says selfish ambition.
Selfish ambition, some text or translations use. What do we generally think of when we think of a faction?
Thinking sides.
Okay. Division, right? Generally we think of faction as division. So in what context do you think he might say that in light of this conversation? Just force him to think a little for a minute here. Don't know?
Don't do it.
It's harder to...
You know what? You take other people's side.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Be going against the unity of the church.
Okay. And now we're hitting on it. Is it possible for me to do acts of service for the point of causing trouble for somebody else?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. We can do things sometimes, and our intent may not be, our attitude and heart may not be, this guy needs my help and so I'm going to help him. It may be, I know that if I do this for him, it is really going to make her mad. Faction. Divide what?
You're boasting.
Yeah. And so but it creates, you should never do acts of service for the point of faction, of dividing people. That's not what service is about. It's not about trying to disconnect people. Service should be always about uniting people together. So he says, don't do anything through faction, through the purpose of division or dividing or causing trouble or turmoil among members, or through vainglory, personal selfishness. Go ahead.
If we see something needs to be done, we should just go ahead and do it, and we don't do it to be seen by others.
Right. And that's the vainglory part. We've got to be careful that we don't care whether it gets recognized or not. That's the hard part. Because here's what happens. Here's what we do sometimes with service. We do something kind or generous or whatever it might be. And we didn't get a thank you card. We didn't get a pat on the back. Nobody acknowledged us. There was no paper write-up. Nobody ever said a word. So what do I think about the next time when something comes up that I can do to help?
I'm not going to do it.
I'm not going to do that. They didn't even thank you last time. They didn't even acknowledge it. Didn't even mention it. Now, I'm not saying that attitude's right. I'm just saying we can't think that way. when it comes to service. You and I cannot be concerned about whether there's any glory that comes from it. If our mindset is, am I going to get credit for this? Then don't even bother. Because the Lord said it's not really going to bring any real benefit.
God will give you credit.
That's right. And that's really the interest we should have. Let His law book and His ultimate thanksgiving be shown in heaven. And not worry about whether we get those things. So, no vainglory, no divisiveness, but with lowliness of mind, let each count others what? Are you better than me?
No.
Not always, right? Sometimes you are, and sometimes you are, in certain skill sets, in certain talent sets. You may be, but I never treat you that way, and you never treat me that way. I think that's what he's trying to say. That we never think. The reality is that some people do have better talents than I have. There are some people who are far better plumbers than I am. My mom laughed because there's a really bad, funny, horrible story behind that. But anyway, some people have better, but we never treat one another as though I am better. I don't think of myself as better. That's the disposition I have to avoid and be cautious about. And we're not always concerned about our own things, but we're looking out for other people. That's all part of this awareness process. And it all needs to be part of this effort that we have to become more in tune with our brothers and sisters in Christ so that we can be a greater help to them. It's a two-way street. It requires me to be more open. Again, we kind of like to treat our homes like bat caves, right? You know, we drive in them and the stone comes across the opening and I'm in my bat cave. And leave me alone, and I'll leave you alone, and I'll do my thing, and you do your thing, and I don't need you, and you don't need me, and that's a happy little environment we created for ourselves. But we, as brothers and sisters in Christ, we've got to be careful not to get into that mindset. I've got to be open to people who want to be engaged in my life, and hoping that they reciprocate as well. That's how the strongest congregations that I've ever been around, generally I see that in them, that there is an openness. And all. What time is it? Let me share one other thing with you, from an observation standpoint, from somebody who's had opportunity to travel around and worship and be around lots of different congregations. You know which congregations have the greatest trouble with this awareness? And wanting to know one another better. You know which ones struggle the most?
The bigger ones.
Well, it's the bigger ones in some senses, but it's the ones who everybody's related already. It is. When you already have a nucleus of family inside the congregation, you don't need the rest of the congregation, right? Because I go to worship with 10 or 20 of my relatives, so I don't need the other 90 because I already have the 10 or 12 that are already related to me. So I don't need. When I go into congregations where they all move there, and 50 to 75% of them don't have a single relative in the building with them, there is an enormously different feel among them because they need each other, right? You know, there are young couples who don't have a mother or a grandmother or an aunt they can call to come babysit. They've got to call one of their brothers or sisters in Christ in order to help them with that. So be warned, all you Rockwells, that it can be dangerous. Not dangerous, that's too strong a word. But it can be challenging when I already have such strong connections, familial connections. Those congregations tend to struggle with openness because I don't need to open up to everybody else because I already have enough people who know me, know what I need. I help them, they help me, and it's all good. And so just keep that in mind. Not an indictment, just something to think about. All right, let's move on. So once you're aware, what's the next phase? Part 3. And now I got to do something, okay? Right attitude. Now I know what I need to do for somebody. I'll do it, right? Now it takes action. It takes me stepping up. He mentions the fact that the word serve is a what? It's a verb, right? The word serve is a verb. It's an action. I can be the most well-intended, kind-hearted, sweetest talking person in the world. But if I never do anything, it doesn't avail anything. I mean, how many times have we had the best of intentions and it never left? It never left the intention stage. You know, we contemplate and we meditate and we think about and we consider and we recontemplate and we never get anything done. It's got to get past the thinking stage. At some point, it's got to move past the thinking stage and into the action stage. Go to James chapter 2. James chapter 2. Verse 15. If a brother or sister be naked and in lack of daily food, and one of you say unto them, Go in peace, be ye warmed and filled, and yet you give them not the things needful to the body, what doth it profit? So, if the need is clothing, and I offer words, what help was I? None. Because words can't clothe anybody. Words don't feed anybody. And so the need at some point in time may be words, by the way. I may not need your food. I may not need your clothes. I may not need something physical or tangible. My need might be encouragement. My need might be exhortation. My need might be rebuke. So it may be words. But notice he said the problem is your brother or sister is naked in lack of daily food. Words won't help them. You can't just say, I hope you get fed. Boy, I hope you find a way to get some clothes. I sure hope you find... No, it doesn't help them. What is it profit? Even so faith, if it hath not works, is dead in itself. It doesn't assist anyone to say, go in peace, when the need is physical. And I want you to notice something else he did say. And I don't say this to be hypercritical. I say it for thought process. If a brother or sister be naked and in lack of daily food, form a committee who will sit down weekly and determine how. I want you to realize that we over-organize simple things. And we have been so programmed to believe that it takes some kind of bureaucratic structure to help somebody. It doesn't take a bureaucratic structure to help somebody. It takes me having right attitude, me becoming aware of what the need is, and me doing what needs to be done. And we have so, I don't know how to describe it, but have so become so used to feeling like the answer to everything is we've got to form some group who's going to take care of that need. Now, don't misunderstand me. Civically, there may be all kinds of good organizations out there who do good things. That's not my point. My point is he's trying to impress upon me personally. You see someone who needs some food, give them some food. If you've got food and you have the ability to give them, and you see and you're aware of what the need is, then just do that. Just do that. See the need, fulfill the need. Don't overcomplicate how it is that we can help and assist. And most certainly, don't throw platitudes and words and cliches at people when what they need is food. Be careful of how we respond to certain things. Sometimes it's physical. James 1:27 says to visit the fatherless and the widows, to keep oneself unspotted from the world, is pure and undefiled religion, personal obligation, to take care of the needs and the physical challenges that some might be facing.
Is he talking to individuals here, or is he be talking to the church as a
In
whole.
James 1,
Taken out of the treasure.
in James 1,
Well, in James,
yeah, if you're talking about James 1:27,
I'm talking about the.
well, I don't think, I don't think James 2 is, I think they're both individual. I don't think he's talking to the church in James 2 or in James 1:27. James 1:27 in particular, I couldn't anymore have the church take care of the fatherless and widows for me any more than they can keep themselves unspotted for me. I think that's the simplest statement you can make out of James 1:27 to try to apply it to the group. If the group can take care of the fatherless and the widows for me, then the group can also keep itself unspotted for me. And that doesn't make any sense. And so I think James 1:27 is individual, and I think he's got the same mindset in James chapter 2 when he talks about things and responsibility. There are plenty of other texts that talk about what the church can do in relationship to the saints. There's plenty of obligation that the church does have as a group to take care of its own. These texts are more about me personally and what I should be doing as a servant.
James 1:27 uses the pronoun himself,
Yeah,
which is singular.
yeah, it's a singular form, absolutely. The needs may not always be physical, though. Here's where it gets complicated, right? I don't wish any kind of physical need upon anybody. But the truth is, it is a lot easier to hand somebody a bag full of groceries than it is to help them carry their baggage. It's a lot easier to hand them something they need physically than it is to help them carry their emotional challenges and difficulties that they're dealing with. You and I have to be willing to really give of ourselves when you're talking about helping somebody who's got spiritual and emotional challenges. Because, trust me, it is far, far more depleting of your energies and your being to open yourself up emotionally and allow yourself to help carry the hurt and the difficulties that people may be facing in that way. Romans 12 verse 15 says, what two things do we do? And we rejoice with those who rejoice, and we weep with those who weep. And let me suggest to you, by the way, that both of those are important. If all we do is weep with one another, that's not a very good family relationship, right? If the only thing that we ever experience with one another is the sorrow aspects of life, that's going to be a dark place to be. So I appreciate what the Apostle Paul does there. He tells us that both ends of the spectrum need to be experienced collectively with one another. That when people are in celebratory mode, I get into celebratory mode. When they're in sorrow mode, I am in sorrow mode. That we appreciate both aspects, and that we do what we can to encourage one another through those things. In Galatians chapter 6 and verse 2, we're told to do what with one another's burdens? Bear ye one another's burdens. Again, it's emotionally and physically depleting to open ourselves up to the... And sometimes we feel like, well, I can't help because I don't know what the answers are. Friend, let me tell you, I have sat down in many a discussion with folks who have sat across the couch from me or in an office somewhere, and they unload a piece of history to me that I don't have the first idea how I can answer the challenge they may be experiencing. But what I can do is let them know I'll do what I can to help you carry this. I may not always, sometimes we're reluctant to get involved emotionally with somebody's challenges because we say, well, how can I don't know how to answer that. I don't know what bearing with one another's burdens doesn't mean that I always know the answer to their burdens. It doesn't mean that I'm always going to have a solution to it. It means I help them carry it. It may not have a solution. There have been tons of circumstances, unfortunately, that I've had to sit and hear folks pour their hearts out. I don't have a solution. There may not be a full answer that they're seeking. But sometimes it's not about whether I can answer it or not. It's not about waving a magic wand and saying, here, it's all better. Sometimes what it's about is me saying, I can't change it, I can't fix it, I don't know what the answer might be, but I'll help you carry it. And I'm here to help you do that. I'm here to help you carry this burden, whatever it might be. Go ahead, Mark.
There's a lot of people in this congregation who have lost loved ones. And I don't find it, and take my own personal situation, but I wanted somebody to come and weep with me. I just wanted somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
So it's not how big of a job you have to do, it's just put yourself out there.
Yeah. I have found, Bob, and people are, and some people are different in regard, and that's the awareness part of kind of knowing how people are. Sometimes, and it's hard to, but you're, just like you said, sometimes all folks need. I can't fix the loss. I can't fix that. But what I can do is sit there and let you or somebody else tell their story. And sometimes all they need in that moment is for me to be willing. And it's not, it's not enjoyable in that sense. But we know it can benefit somebody to just let them tell their story. And what the challenge with that sometimes is we're not all wired that way. Not all of us want to tell them. You know what I mean? Some folks are more introverted. They're more, and they're not. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is that just because I may not want to tell my story doesn't mean I shouldn't listen and let somebody else tell their story. That's what I'm trying to say.
I mean, just as simple as, hey, you want to go out to eat with me today?
Yeah.
Hey, you want to go to Burger King with me?
Yeah.
Just make yourself available.
Yeah. It's simpler. It's simpler than we think sometimes. And the truth is, I mean, sometimes you're right, but a lot of people aren't looking for you to fix their problems. They just need to know somebody's there to help carry them, and that somebody's concerned about them, and is aware that they're aware. And sometimes that can go a long way, just to know that somebody's aware of what's going on here in the thing. So the service aspect of this isn't always as complicated as we drive it.
You want people to care.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Sometimes they're emotional needs. Sometimes they're spiritual needs. Babes in Christ need to be helped to be established in the faith. We've made the mistake too often, where you have a babe in Christ, someone's new to the gospel, somebody's just newly converted, and we expect them to know everything that somebody who's been sitting here for 55 years knows. And it's a wrong expectation that we have. Sometimes they're going to need exhorted and encouraged and established in the faith. There are going to be those who are struggling with their faith who need some exhortation along the way. We need more people being more aware of that. If I were to tell you that there have been members that we have not seen at all over the past couple of weeks, would you know who they are? I'm just asking. I'm not asking for names. I'm just asking you, are you aware? Are you aware? If somebody's going out, sometimes folks, it can happen one week because we're kind of, maybe they do some traveling and things and we don't think much, but how long would it take for me to notice that a member of the church, we hadn't seen them in a while? How long would it take us to notice that? And secondly, on top of that, then how long will it take me to react to what I became aware of? And that, is that an elder's job? Yes, by the way. Yes, it's an elder's work. But not just their work. Sure, they're shepherds. They've got obligations to be aware of those things and pay attention. But it's not just their work. It's all of our work. All of us ought to be aware of one another. All of us ought to be paying attention to one another. And when we become aware, maybe some exhortation needs to go. Somebody's being unruly. Elders may be the last to know, by the way. Somebody's conduct is deemed unruly. They may be the last ones to know, but I've known for a long time. What am I doing to encourage or warn my brothers and sisters in Christ who are unruly in the eyes of God? People who are slipping away from the Lord, people who need restored, the unfaithful, who need it. I need to be aware of all these things. I can't always say, well, that's somebody else's job, somebody else's responsibility, somebody else will take care of it. Truth be known, and again, this just comes from experience of different connections over my life. When the elders approach somebody who fits one of these descriptions, generally speaking, that person's reaction very often is, I fully expected the elders. And because there was an expectation, the receptiveness of that isn't as great. But I've seen a lot of folks who, when it wasn't just the elders, when 5, 10, 15 other members also sent a note, made a phone call, did something to encourage them, it makes a difference. It has a different kind of effect when they realize, oh, this wasn't just the elders being the elders. This was members seeing and being aware of my circumstance. And so be aware of the spiritual things that are going on with our brothers and sisters in Christ as best we can. And get involved in it. Don't always just pass that off as somebody else's responsibility. And then finally what? Make yourself available. Okay? Make yourself available. Again, great intentions, great attitude, all the right things. Make yourself available. Okay? If don't, can I always be available? Scratch that one off, right? No, I can't always be available. But don't go tell somebody. If you ever need anything, give me a call. And every time they try to call, I'm never available. Because it doesn't take very many calls for them to just go, not worth it. Sometimes I'm going to have to make myself available. And sometimes, back to the selflessness, sometimes I'm going to have to make myself available in a sacrificial way. Some things can't be avoided. Some things can't be, but sometimes I'm going to have to say, I don't need the 30-second trip to the mall this month. I can negate number 32 trip so that I can go be available to this person for what they need. Sometimes it takes me being willing to say, I can do without this so that I can make myself available. I can't always do that, but sometimes I can. Sometimes I can say, that's not important enough right now. We've got to make ourselves available if these things are going to work. I did it again. I'll answer the questions very first thing Wednesday, and then we'll move on. Lesson 10. So we'll go through these questions as review on Wednesday night, Lord willing. Then we'll go into Lesson 10.